Thank you very much, Rainis, for the introduction, and good morning to all the participants and the interpreters. I am just trying to upload my presentation, so please bear with me. As Rainis indicated, the main goal of my presentation today for this event is to give you a bit an overview, an update of what is going on in terms of policies at EU level regarding buildings, and in particular what is happening in the context of the revision of the Energy Performance of Building Directive, and the policy background for this, and to focus really on the elements of the PBD revision that are more relevant in relation to investment for renovation and financial instruments that are needed to support the renovation of buildings. I always like to start by recalling a bit some elements and data regarding the EU building stock. As we all know, Europe is the old continent, and this is also reflected in the status of the building stock. Which at the same time has also impacts on the level of energy performance and of energy efficiency of our buildings. So we have definitely a very large building stock, but it's also an old building stock. 85% of existing buildings were built before the year 2000. And we know that the energy requirements for building were introduced basically after the previous energy crisis. So the large majority of the buildings that we have now standing were built when there were no energy standards in the building codes, and therefore the energy performance is on average quite low. Buildings are also renovated every year for different reasons, for functional reasons mainly, and to some extent also for energy reasons. We have assessed that on average 11% of existing buildings every year undergo some changes, some level of renovations, but the level of energy renovation is still quite low. So the opportunity of changing functions buildings and combining these changes also with improvement in the energy performance is not there, does not often take place, and on average only 1% of the European buildings are undergo energy renovation every year. And the result of the fact that the energy performance is quite poor, but also that, of course, we spend a lot of time in buildings, is that basically buildings are the largest consumers of energy in the EU, more than transport, more than industry. Almost 40% of the energy we consume is used in buildings, and this also is reflected in a very high share, around 36% of greenhouse gas emissions that are emitted in the building stock. To address this issue and to increase the level and the rate of energy renovation, already with the European Green Deal, several actions were foreseen at a European level. And the overall aim of this was really to step up and double the rate of energy renovation, and at the same time to increase investments and make available dedicated financial instruments for building renovation at larger scale, bearing in mind that energy renovation will also bring benefits to the economy, because there are, of course, the markets related to energy renovations, to construction, the manufacturing of products, appliances, materials that are necessary to energy renovations, and bring benefit to the society as a whole, because we reduce our energy dependence, energy consumption, and greenhouse gas emissions, but also to individuals. Because it reduces the energy bills and increase comfort in our house and homes. In particular, in the context of the energy of the European Green Deal, there was a specific strategy for buildings, which is the renovation wave, with the aim of doubling energy renovation, but which was adopted in 2020. But then, as Rainis recalled, our context today in relation to the use of energy has dramatically changed. And it becomes, therefore, even more relevant to invest in the energy renovation of buildings. And at European level, in March and then in May last year, the Commission has adopted a REPowerEU plan with the goal of saving energy, producing clear energy, and diversifying energy supplies. And lots of actions have been taken in that context. But what is also a clear message coming out of it, of course, we need to save energy in the short term, this winter, next winter, also through our behaviors, and not to waste energy. But at the same time, what we are doing, which will take a bit more time, through the implementation of the renovation waste strategy, to really have stronger rules in relation to the energy performance of buildings, is really also the solution to the crisis that we have now. So we need to continue what we are doing and to improve our legislation on buildings. And in relation to that, the Energy Performance of Building Directive, which is the key legislative instrument at EU level, together with the Energy Efficiency Directive more broadly, it was decided already in the context of the Green Deal to revise it, and a proposal has been adopted in December last year. And this revision, of course, now we look at it in a different light, and it has also been somehow strengthened by adding additional provisions on solar energy in buildings through the REPowerEU plan. Before going into the specific elements that we are revising in the PPD, I would like just to show you some slides regarding what I mentioned before in relation to the economic benefits of energy renovations. We have made some calculations regarding how much we can save in our energy bill by upgrading buildings that are in the lowest class, in the G class, so the worst performing buildings, to higher classes, so to class D, which is not a high class, it's still an average class. But in principle, of course, there are several differences between countries, between member states. But when we upgrade a G energy class building, or a GF, by 2 classes, this allows a reduction of energy consumption by 30–40%. Of course, this is different depending on the climate we are, depending on several issues. So take these figures with a pinch of salt, but the message is clear. We have in the slides also some examples showing also from the point of view of the comfort, of the aesthetic, etc. What is the impact of renovating and also of having deep renovations, and also calculation of the payback of those investments, which is quite interesting to look at, because of course we know that renovation do not happen from one day to the other. We need dedicated financial instruments. We need technical assistance for assisting people and building owners to do the renovation. But the economic case for the investment is also clear. And I have here some examples of a renovation project in Romania, in Bucharest, in Estonia, which in this case was also funded through a public program, also showing a payback of 8 years for the renovation to a G class, to class E of a multi-apartment building. And I have also this slide about deep renovation in Hungary, and you can see the pictures are really dates of almost 20 years ago. which means that definitely we have the technology, we have the solutions to make renovation. It's not, it's a market which is mature, but we know that there are many barriers, and definitely to have a clear regulatory framework and to have dedicated financial instrument is what is really needed to help and support people and building owners in doing the renovations. Okay, I will move now to some explanations regarding which are the main elements of the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, which the Commission has proposed to revise. I don't know how much familiar you are with the EPBD directive, but it's basically a directive that has been adopted in its original text several years ago, that was already amended a couple of times, and basically set the framework also for the energy performance classes of buildings, and then identify standards, energy standards, especially for new buildings and also for buildings undergoing major renovations, and also has a set of rules regarding, for instance, inspections of buildings and technical building system. So it's really the key legislative element on the energy performance of buildings, which is transposed and applied in every member state. And with the revision, the aim was really to strengthen it, to allow for more renovations to take place, and also to have deeper energy renovations. So to ensure that when a renovation is done, really the best technology is used so that energy savings can be achieved in an optimal and cost-effective way. So the first box that you see in this slide identify the key new provisions or updates regarding the renovation of buildings. And one of it is the introduction of building renovation plans, which will substitute what we have already now, also in Latvia and in all EU member states, which is the long-term renovation strategies, which is a very important planning instrument at national level to identify the key policies for renovating buildings and the key segment of the building stock, the key targets and goal. But we have foreseen to strengthen this tool, to make it more operational and to link it also more to the available budget and investment needs, and to have also dialogue of the Commission with the Commission that can issue recommendations or assess the plans. Then a second and very, very important new provision that we have foreseen is the introduction of minimum energy performance standards. This is possibly the most important element of the revision of the PBD, and it's basically an instrument to trigger the renovation of worst performing buildings. And in the Commission proposal, we have foreseen that G buildings will have to be upgraded to F or to E over time, starting with public buildings, but also very much addressing also residential buildings. We have also foreseen a strengthening and common criteria and more information to be included in energy performance certificates, and the introduction of a voluntary instrument, which is the renovation passport, to really help people during a renovation in the best way, step by step, in a logical way. There are also several measures related to increase really the decarbonization of buildings over time. We have a goal of climate neutrality by 2050. But we need to make progress already by 2030 and by 2040. And in this context, we have foreseen a review of the standards for new buildings. Now we have a standard which is called nearly zero energy buildings that aims for new buildings to have really high level of energy efficiency. But we are moving towards a concept which is related to zero emissions. So no emissions of greenhouse gas on site for new buildings, which means using technologies like heat pumps or compensating the use of fossil fuels with renewable technologies on site. We are also starting to address the whole life cycle carbon, especially for new buildings, so to disclose information about also embodied carbon that relates to the emissions that are included in the materials that are used. And we have also foreseen that subsidies, national subsidies to fossil fuels, for instance, to gas boilers, should stop, should end, and that public funds should be instead directed towards the technologies that are related to renewable energies. We have also a new set of rules related to the modernization and system integration of buildings. I will not go into the details of that, but this relates to the strengthening of the rules regarding charging of electric cars in buildings, the increase of aspects in relation to the accessibility of data for buildings and the digitalization also of energy performance certificates, and also improvements regarding the smart readiness indicator. Regarding financing, which is a very important topic in relation to the event of today, we have foreseen to provide much clearer guidance regarding how also to set funding at a national level, clearly indicating that member states will have to support the implementation of minimum energy performance standards through dedicated funds and technical assistance, especially targeting vulnerable consumers, vulnerable households and people affected by energy poverty. And also we have foreseen a new definition of deep renovation, which is something that, of course, is a concept that has a general understanding, but there was not a legal definition of deep renovation, and this is going to be a voluntary definition, and it is linked to the concept of zero emission buildings that I was mentioning before. One important additional information regards the process. So as I mentioned, the proposal to review the Energy Performance of Building Directive was adopted in December 2021, and it's now under negotiations in the interinstitutional process. So we had a discussion in the council with a representative from the member states. And in this regard, there were several amendments and changes that were proposed. And a general approach was adopted at the Energy Council on the 25th of October, so a few weeks ago. So now the discussion continues in the European Parliament. The Parliament is expected to also provide a mandate for the trilogues in December this year. And next year, we will start a trilogue within the three institutions, so Council, Parliament, and the Commission. And the timeline is such that we expect an adoption of the revised EPBD in spring next year. In the next slides, I have a bit more of details regarding the most important provisions that I mentioned already. This slide is about the building renovation plans, which are foreseen in Article 3, and that replace long-term renovation strategies. One important element that will distinguish is that we have foreseen a dedicated template also of these plans, really indicating the mandatory elements that we have for building renovation plans, and that we propose to have this plan every 5 years. Now we have every 10 years, but we realize that it's a too long period, that we need more checks over time, and we need a shorter timeline for those plans. I mentioned already the minimum energy performance standards and the goal to phase out worst performing buildings. Then I mentioned also the definition of deep renovation, and I will spend a bit more of time on this. So we had foreseen basically this definition has identified a sort of a gold standard for building renovation. And in particular, we have foreseen a definition that keeps in mind the end goal of a renovation, which should be before 2030, the achievement of nearly zero energy building. And after 2030, a renovation that basically transformed the building into a zero emission building, having a high energy performance and without emissions on site. And as I mentioned, is something that should really also drives support and financial support, and also the development of financial instruments. But it's a voluntary definition per se. Regarding financial incentives and market barriers, we have some provisions in the revised EPBD in Article 15, which basically aims at requiring the member states provide appropriate financing and support measures for building renovation, the removal of non-economic barriers, for instance, split incentives in multi-apartment buildings, which is really a key issue for the renovation of buildings. The phase out of financial incentives for fossil fuel boilers, and really much more attention and targeting of support towards vulnerable households. I will stop here. I'm happy to reply to your questions now, and I have in my slide also some further elements and links to the proposal and further elements on buildings policies in case you are interested. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Serena, for precise timing and for the outline of what is to come. I think there's quite an ambition in some of those points, under some of those points, and I just wonder myself if we can expect also a bit of financing channel towards achieving these more ambitious goals compared to the previous times. So I hope that the Commission has taken this into consideration so that we can handle these things swiftly, that they do not remain only as very ambitious goals, but also translate into action. Can you comment on any changes in the approach the Commission will have?
Yes. So on this, definitely, we know that there is the investment challenge in building renovation also translates in financial needs. We definitely know that it's important to have public support, so public funding available for renovation, especially for some for more vulnerable consumers or for those that cannot afford renovations. But at the same time, we know that not everything can be achieved with public funding. So it's really fundamental also to scale up the availability of financial instruments of private funding through dedicated instruments and tools. Probably we have made very few developments there were in the last years. We need definitely to have more dedicated instruments that are simpler for citizens to apply, to use. So there's definitely also a need to scale up financial instruments. Regarding funding from the EU specifically, you know that in the recovery plans we had this specific attention to building renovation through the Renovate flagship, and almost all member states basically allocated substantial funds already to building renovation. So it's really unprecedented what we are experiencing now. A lot of public funds are available now for the renovation of buildings, and you also know that from the point of view of the EU budget, we have this planning that is organized into 7 years cycle. So we have already committed funds for the ongoing period, and then we will have the next financial period later on. And normally the commitment to funds really follows what are the policy priorities projects. So definitely we can expect that what we have in a strengthened regulatory framework will also be accompanied by dedicated funds. We have already now the recovery plans, and in the future we can expect that this will continue. But as I mentioned, we think that it's also important to have a very clear regulatory framework that can really help in directing investments into building renovation. So we need to work on both sides.
Thank you for the comment. There is I'll allow one more question here. There's a question in the chat to you about Hungary, example of Hungary. So what is the energy tariff? Because the 7-year payback period seems very, very short. Could you please elaborate a bit on that, if you can?
Yeah, so this was, as you have seen, a big multi-apartment building. It was a deep renovation. I don't have in mind specifically what were the energy prices and what were the specific calculations behind it, but in the slide that you will receive, there is a link to a full report that basically explains what are the calculation made, and also the examples that I have put in my slides from other countries, and the general table. The data are really taken from real examples of renovations. We have a database which is publicly acceptable, which is publicly accessible, which is called Deep Database of investment in energy efficiency, including in energy renovations, and the data were taken really from there, and this comes from real investments and projects in building renovation.
Good. So it means that people simply can check out the links to get more detailed information about specific projects. All right, so that is a good thing, I think. And I can just remind that
just to add on the payback period is that one general comment to share is that it's a bit surprising, but what we have seen is that deeper renovation have a shorter payback time. Because of course, when you do a small renovation, also the impacts on the energy bill is smaller, so the payback is longer. While when you do a deeper renovation, of course, the upfront investment is much higher, but also the savings are higher, and the payback is shorter.
Yes, that seems to correspond also the theory and the observations from practical examples also locally in Latvia. There are not so many examples, but still deep renovation provides better effect, although the upfront investment, of course, is higher. That is true. I don't see any other questions at this moment, so shall I say thank you to Serena, and if you can stay for a while, you can. We'll be happy to have you still here, but when you have to leave, you have to leave, and we'll report back to you how it all ended. But thank you so far for the presentation.